What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Formula One Power Rankings. My name is Connor, the co host with the most, and here we are at the penultimate episode of the Formula One Power Rankings. We only have 2 more weeks left in the season, and then we're going to be moving on to. After those two races, we'll have the final episode of the Power Rankings. I'll talk a little bit about next year. Not sure if I'm going to do this next year or not. I guess we'll see if I decide I want to, but at least it'll be a start. And then what I'm probably going to move to after we're done with this is I'm going to start making some tier lists, something more related to the Clutch Crew Sports podcast. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But until that point, let's go ahead with the penultimate episode of the Power Rankings. So at the bottom of the list this week, we're going to have the two Haas drivers, Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen. Obviously, unless you've been living under a rock in the past few weeks, or I guess the past few days, really, not the past few weeks, past few days, you've heard about the horrific crash that happened with Romain Grosjean. Obviously, the car split in half, the car caught on fire. Thankfully, it's a testament to modern safety in Formula One that he was able to escape with only a couple fractured ribs and some minor burns on his hands. But obviously, due to that crash, he's not going to be competing this weekend. He probably won't be competing next weekend either. But we'll see. But just hoping for speedy recovery for Roman. He looks like he's doing fine. I mean, like I said, he only came away with very minor injuries. And apparently, the car splitting in half is actually a safety feature that I didn't even realize. Apparently, it is a safety feature, but something did go wrong with it where the fuel tank ruptured, and that's why the car caught on fire, which isn't supposed to happen. So, they're going to be looking into that and seeing what went wrong there because apparently the car splitting in half was supposed to happen. Can't say I knew that, but very interesting. And then obviously, very briefly, Kevin Magnussen, just not a good string of races for him. But it has officially been announced that Haas did come out and announce their two drivers for next season. So obviously, one of them, Mick Schumacher. I mean, I know I've talked about this a couple times that Schumacher was either going to be part of Alfa Romeo or he was going to be part of Haas. And in the last episode, I talked about how Alfa Romeo was bringing back Giovinazzi and Raikkonen, so Haas was going to be the destination for Mick Schumacher, and it is. So Mick Schumacher is going to be racing at Haas next season, and then also I don't know why I forgot his name. I've blanked so far. But Nikita Mazepin, that's right. Nikita Mazepin will be racing alongside him. So Haas going with two young drivers. Very interesting to see how they're going to do next season. Obviously, I know Haas is more or less like they're kind of expecting that they're not going to be very good next year, but they're more or less waiting for the regulation changes in 2022, and then they're hoping that they'll be good after the regulation changes come in. And also, one last quick note: Pietro Fittipaldi will be the one replacing Romain Grosjean, at least for this weekend and probably next weekend too. He's been the test driver for Haas, the grandson of the great Emerson Fittipaldi. So we'll see how he does. He's going to get a chance to shine on the biggest stage. Usually these test drivers don't get a chance. So who knows? Maybe he can impress enough that he'll earn himself a seat in the near future. Looks like probably not for next season, but maybe. Who knows? So number 18, we've got Nicholas Latifi. Kind of in his usual spot. He's been qualifying at the back of the grid, a retirement in the Turkish Grand Prix, and then a 14th place in the Bahrain Grand Prix. Pretty good. There were a couple retirements that happened that kind of propelled him up, but Williams is still without points this year, and it's looking very unlikely unless something dramatic happens in the next two races that Williams is actually going to finish the season with 0 points. Which I don't know if they've ever done that in their history. I would think probably not, unless it was like the very first season that they competed all the way back in the late 70s, but certainly not in modern day Formula One. And over the course of, at least the last 30 or 40 years, they haven't finished with 0 points ever. So this is going to be very disappointing and very shocking for Williams. Like I said, unless something dramatic happens, because it is possible. I mean, it didn't seem like Williams was going to score any points last season, but then obviously there were a couple penalties at the end of the German Grand Prix that elevated Robert Kubica to 10th and got Williams 1 point and avoided a big zero on their column. So we'll see what happens, but not looking good for Williams. So number 17, we're going to have, 17 and 16, we're going to have the two Alfa Romeo drivers, Antonio Giovinazzi and Kimi Raikkonen. Nothing really much to say about them. Raikkonen had a good qualifying showing in the Turkish Grand Prix, but then kind of fell back after that. He had a rocket start in that race too, but I can't remember exactly what happened. He just kind of fell back down the standings. It seems like Alfa Romeo doesn't ever really do a good job at strategizing, and Raikkonen will kind of put them in a position where they could maybe get some points, and then like Alfa Romeo just screws it up with their strategy. So who knows? Giovinazzi, he was looking really good at the Turkish Grand Prix, a 10th place qualifying, like for one of the few times he had made it into Q. Maybe it was the first time, I don't know. If he'd done it before, it had only been once or twice where he gotten into Q3. So Giovinazzi, I think ever since he heard that his seat was going to be in danger, he's kind of been picking it up. So we'll see how he does. Alfa Romeo, obviously a backmarker team, but making the best out of a situation. So number 15, this is definitely the most interesting, I guess, ranking on this list is George Russell. So obviously a good weekend at the Bahrain Grand Prix, qualified 14th, finished 12th. Um, you know, he's definitely been the one who's been consistently kind of right there trying to get points for Williams this season. But obviously the big news coming out, Lewis Hamilton tested positive for COVID-19, which obviously, thankfully for his sake, he's already clinched the championship and Mercedes has already clinched the Constructors' Championship, because if that wasn't the case at this point in the season, that would have been really bad news for Lewis Hamilton, but he's already clinched it. Lewis Hamilton's going to be out with COVID-19, and George Russell is going to be taking his place in the Mercedes, and I mean, this is his chance to shine, right? He's been in a car that's sucked for his whole career, but he's always out qualified his teammate. He's always, looked like he's had been capable of more. So he's going to get a chance to race in the W11 at the Secure Grand Prix, and he's really going to have to show. It's really a proving ground for him. If he finishes anywhere outside the top five, then maybe Mercedes might be thinking, oh, maybe we overhyped this guy, or maybe he's not as good as we think. But it's definitely a very important weekend for George Russell to show that he is the next big thing, and that he can be the successor to Lewis Hamilton in the future. Because that's kind of what the I guess the strategy or the plan has always been, that whenever Lewis Hamilton decides that he's done, George Russell would be the one to step up and take his place, or maybe even be the one to step up and take Valtteri Bottas's place if Bottas ever decides to leave the team. So very, very big weekend for George Russell. Obviously, he's going to get some points, so he's going to elevate himself, unless he retires, but he's going to elevate himself out of last place in the championship. Unfortunately, those points won't be going to Williams, but at least he's going to get some points for himself on the list. Although the one thing for Russell that is in danger, he is in danger of losing that streak. I don't even know what it is. It's like 35 or 36 straight races or something that he's out qualified his teammate. This is the first time where that actually could be in danger, because who knows, if Valtteri Bottas out qualifies him, that would technically count as his teammate out qualifying him. So obviously a very different situation. Bottas, a far more talented driver than Robert Kubica or Nicholas Latifi, but he wouldn't be racing at Mercedes if he wasn't. But definitely a huge weekend for George Russell, and I'm excited to see how he does. Who knows? Given how good the Mercedes car is, and given if he's talented enough, he could get his first win this weekend. So, we already had a first-time winner this season with Pierre Gasly at the Italian Grand Prix, so maybe we have another first-time winner. Who knows? So number 14, on the other end of the spectrum, is Lance Stroll. Terrible, terrible weekends for Lance Stroll. Thankfully for his sake, Sergio Perez is doing really good, and that's keeping Racing Point in the hunt for third place in the championship. Because if you were just going on Lance Stroll alone, good things would not be happening for the team. Obviously, qualified on pole at the Turkish Grand Prix, and everybody, I mean, the Racing Points were really fast at the Turkish Grand Prix. Both him and Perez were super fast, and I don't know, just everything went wrong for him. I don't know if it was his driving, or, I mean, it looked like it was his driving. Like, he was just struggling after they made that first round of pit stops, and everybody just started passing him. So, I mean, it seemed like Racing Point maybe might have left him out there for too long, but the way he just fell down the order when he came back out on the track, like he didn't come out in first, but he came out in like fourth, and he just fell all the way down. So, um, not a good look at all for Lance Stroll. I mean, you never want to qualify on pole and then finish in ninth place. Like that's especially in Formula One. I mean, maybe in NASCAR that tends to happen quite a bit, but in Formula One, if you're qualifying on pole and then you're finishing down in ninth, that's really not a good look. And then obviously a retirement at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Both Racing Points actually retired from that race, so clearly some issues going on with their cars, but not good at all for Lance Stroll. So number 13, we've got Danny Kvyat. Not really much to say about Kvyat. He's kind of still in his usual place, finishing around like between 13th and 10th, like kind of around that area. So um, still fighting for his job. AlphaTauri has not announced who their second driver is going to be next year. So I mean, it's unfortunately probably not going to be him. But I would have thought that by now, if they were going to sign Sergio Perez or Nico Hulkenberg, they would have done it by now. So who knows? Maybe that's a good sign for Danny Kvyat that they're thinking about bringing him back. So number 12, Sebastian Vettel finally getting back on the podium. It's been a long, long while since Sebastian Vettel's been on the podium. I think the last time he was on the podium was like, when was it? I'm trying to remember because his last win came at the Singapore Grand Prix last season, but his last podium, I think, was at the Mexican Grand Prix, if I remember correctly. Because I think I remember it was like he was second in that race, and then Lewis won, and Bottas was third. I think if I remember correctly, and I was really questioning Ferrari's strategy in that race. That's a story for a different time. But Vettel finally back up on the podium. Obviously, a very costly mistake by Charles Leclerc in the penultimate corner at the Turkish Grand Prix that allowed Perez and Vettel to get by. So Leclerc tumbled to fourth, and Vettel finished in third. A very disappointing showing at the Bahrain Grand Prix, but Leclerc also didn't do very good at the Bahrain Grand Prix. So clearly, the Ferrari car is just not suited for that track, which is really interesting because even going back to 2017. Um, like really from 2017, maybe even 2016, just 2016 between 2016 and 2019, the Sakir circuit was like the best circuit on the calendar for Ferrari. Like they always finished in first or second. Like one of their drivers would always be up there, like winning the race. Um, so, I mean, well, maybe not in 2016, but in 2017, Vettel won in 2017, he won in 2018, and then obviously Lewis Hamilton ended up winning in 2019. But had it not been for the failure on Charles Leclerc's car, he would have won that race. So, pretty crazy to see. I mean, it really does illustrate the drop off in pace for Ferrari, that a track that they had won at or were supposed to win at, the last three seasons, and now all of a sudden they're struggling to get into the points. Not a very good look. So it's why I've got Sebastian Vettel still down here at number 12. Number 11, Esteban Ocon. He's kind of in the same place that he has been all year, kind of between that like 8th and 11th range. Obviously he's not really helping his teammate try and get Renault up into, because Renault's fighting for third in the Constructors' Championship, but Ricardo also didn't have a very good couple of races, so can't blame Ocon entirely, but he's still consistently finishing behind Ricardo, which is not good for him. So still interesting to see how he does next season being paired alongside Fernando Alonso. Number 10, Pierre Gasly, a very nice sixth place finish at the Bahrain Grand Prix, a very disappointing 13th at the Turkish Grand Prix. You know, kind of just up and down the board. This is kind of how Pierre Gasly's season has been. I mean, he's one of those drivers that like he'll do really good in one race and then really bad in another one. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a feature of the car or if it's, a feature of the driver that he just like, I don't know. It's just interesting to see. He's probably the most volatile driver on the list. Like if you were trying to bet on someone and bet where they were going to finish, Pierre Gasly would probably be the most volatile racer on the on the grid. Like where does this guy going to finish? Like because who knows? He could be fighting for the top 5 one week and then the next week he's down out of the points. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe in the future if he does get a chance to race for Red Bull again or maybe another big team, he will start getting more consistent finishes. Number 9, Daniel Ricciardo. I just talked about Esteban Ocon. not a good couple of weekends for Renault, trying to get up there and finish in third in the Constructors' Championship. Two podiums for Ricciardo. He hasn't exactly been helped out by Ocon all season, but um, not good for Ricciardo, a 10th and a 7th. Obviously, falling down to 10th after qualifying 5th at the at the Turkish Grand Prix. So, um, excuse me, not good for Ricciardo and not good for Renault when it comes to fighting for the Constructors' Championship. But he is still in 4th place in the Drivers' Championship. So, because obviously the top 3 spots are already decided, it's going to be, you know, Hamilton's going to be first, and then Bottas and Verstappen are going to fight for second, fight for second and third. But 4th place in the championship is really heating up right now. It's kind of like a 3-way race at this point between Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, and Charles Leclerc. And Ricciardo still has the advantage, but Sergio Perez has been putting together some good races recently, so Ricciardo's going to have to step up if he wants to hold on to that 4th place spot in the championship. So number 8, we've got Charles Leclerc. Obviously, was on course for a podium at the Turkish Grand Prix until he kind of he got too aggressive, I guess, in my mind. He tried to make an overtake, and then he was either trying to make an overtake or he was about to get overtaken, and he locked up, and Perez and Vettel went by, and Leclerc fell from the podium all to 4th. Leclerc was very not happy with himself. If you listen to the radio after that race, he was very upset with himself. He was saying, "Oh no, I did a bleep job. I did horrible. That was my fault." The team was trying to say like, "Oh well, just it's okay." I mean, qualifying to go from 14th up to 4th is still incredible, but obviously you're going to be really upset when you had a chance for a podium and you blew it away. And then just Ferrari's lack of pace at the Bahrain Grand Prix was not good, so that also contributed to his drop on this list. So number 7, we've got Lando Norris. A pretty good bounce back 2 races for Lando Norris. He had been having some down races, but an 8th and a 4th, obviously helping McLaren to elevate themselves to 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. That would be something for sure if McLaren were to get 3rd. It would be the first time in a long while that McLaren has finished in the top 3 in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, probably not since 2013 have they finished in the top 3 in the Constructors' Championship. So obviously it's not over yet. Racing Point and Renault are still fighting with them to lock up that spot. I'm not sure how many points ahead they are right now, but it's definitely a very close race at the top for the Constructors' Championship, at least in 3rd place. I think let's see, I'm actually looking at it right now. So you've got McLaren is, if I can do math here, looks like they're 17 points clear of Racing Point in 3rd place, and then Racing Point is another 10 points clear from Renault. Ferrari is only 13 points behind Renault, but Ferrari's probably out of the fight for 3rd place, considering that they are 40 points behind McLaren, so it's really a 3-team race. Renault is kind of falling out of it a little bit, but McLaren definitely with the advantage, and Lando Norris is contributing to that. So number 6, I will say this kind of range between 7th, 6th, 5th, and 4th was kind of really hard for me to figure out where to put everybody. So I've got Sergio Perez at number 6, Alexander Albon at number 5, and Carlos Sainz at number 4. I mainly put Sainz at number 4 because he was the most consistent out of these drivers. 2 5th-place finishes, especially starting where he did in both races. To come up and finish in 5th in both races is incredible. I kept Albon at number 5 just because this is kind of where he should be finishing. He should be finishing on the podium and maybe not quite finishing in 7th place. So nothing really out of the ordinary for Albon, and maybe still not performing to where he should be. And then I put Perez in 6 because obviously he had the 2nd place finish at the Turkish Grand Prix, and then he was on course for another podium, or at least fighting for a podium at the Bahrain Grand Prix until his engine failed towards the end of the race. So, I mean, it's just showing that this fight between Racing Point and McLaren is really close. I mean, Perez obviously really needs help from Lance Stroll, especially with 2 good weekends from the McLaren boys, not helping Racing Point in their fight for 3rd. So, and obviously Checo's still without a job next season. We'll see. Maybe he takes a season off. I don't know. But like I said earlier, when it came to Kvyat, and obviously Albon kind of falls into this too, because Albon's fighting for his job at Red Bull. I mean, if a team like Red Bull or AlphaTauri was going to bring in Sergio Perez or Nico Hulkenberg, I feel like they would have done it by now. I mean, it's very rare that you get to the end of the season and all the driver seats aren't filled yet. Because I mean, we knew last season. I can't even remember. Sometime around like the Japanese or the Mexican Grand Prix, we pretty much knew exactly where, like, who was going to be where. I mean, obviously there wasn't a lot of changes between this season and last season. The only changes were Ocon and Latifi, but it just seems odd to me that Red Bull and AlphaTauri, they still haven't made that decision on what they're going to do. I mean, maybe we're going to get to the end of the season and they're going to be like, oh yes, Albon is our driver, and then who knows what they're going to do with AlphaTauri, but you know, they are taking a very long time, so stay tuned for what they might do. I have no idea. I mean, my gut tells me that they're going to bring back Alexander Albon, but I mean, I just don't know. I honestly don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what goes through the head of Christian Horner and Helmut Marko when it comes to their drivers. So, I mean, I think they're going to, like I said, I'm leaning towards that they're going to keep Albon, but who knows? Who knows? And then obviously the top three, they've been the top three pretty much the whole season. I actually considered dropping Valtteri Bottas below number three, but because he's just had two atrocious weekends. I mean, 15th in the Turkish Grand Prix and 8th at the Bahrain Grand Prix. I mean, especially with the car that he's driving, it just seems like he should be doing a lot better. And especially with the way that Hamilton is competing. I mean, Hamilton's won the last 5 races in a row, so I mean he's won 6 of the last 7. So it's just not a good look for Bottas, and it's unfortunate considering that he was, at the start of the season he was very much in the picture for the championship, and then slowly over the course of the season he just fell out of it and allowed Lewis to run away with it again. So obviously moving Max Verstappen up to second. Um, he got a little bit too aggressive at the Turkish Grand Prix. It's too bad for him because honestly, he had a chance to win at the Turkish Grand Prix, but he made a mistake when he was going for an overtake on Sergio Perez and spun the car around. So, and then it dropped him down. He had no chance. But a strong second place finish in the Bahrain Grand Prix. So I mean, Verstappen's just he's kind of been hanging around all season. I'm not sure how far behind he is Valtteri Bottas for second because I think that's still in contention too. Yeah, it looks like he's only 12 points behind Valtteri Bottas for second. So Verstappen very well could end the season in second place, which, given the pace of the Mercedes cars and given how Lewis Hamilton's just been dominating and how Mercedes has been dominating, I mean, even if you take away Valtteri Bottas's points, Lewis Hamilton, if you just take Lewis Hamilton's points, Mercedes would still win the Constructors' Championship. That's how dominant they've been this season. Like, even if Valtteri Bottas didn't exist, Mercedes would still win the Constructors' Championship. So, um, we'll see if Verstappen can get himself up into second. It'd be kind of a good consolation prize for Red Bull after this season. Obviously, the season hasn't turned out the way they hoped, but um, who knows? And then obviously the man himself, it is now confirmed 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. I mean, not much else to say about him other than he's just doing what he does, winning races, qualifying on pole. I mean, Mercedes has just been dominant this season, and he still hasn't signed a contract for next season. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe Lewis Hamilton. I mean, I highly doubt that Lewis Hamilton is done. Um, Maybe he just wants to take a year off. I don't know, or maybe he wants more money. I don't know what's going on with why he hasn't signed a contract yet, but obviously can't deny he's the world champion. Mercedes are the constructors champion. Pretty much what everybody expected coming into this season, and I don't know if they expected how dominant they were going to be, but the result definitely isn't outside of what everyone expected. So that's going to be it for this episode, guys. Make sure you stay tuned. I will be releasing the next episode very soon because the next 2 race weekends are really close together. So, like, there's the Secure Grand Prix this weekend, and then right after that, next weekend is going to be the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So, very shortly, in a very quick time, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be releasing the final episode of the Power Rankings. Um, and hopefully by that point we have a little bit more clarity on who the Red Bull and AlphaTauri drivers are going to be. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for the final episode in 2 weeks' time. And always, as always, be clutch.